I never imagined a day would come when my own name would echo back to me like a stranger's. Eleanor Perry, 72 years old, widowed, mother of one, keeper of too many memories and far too many quiet heartbreaks. Some days, when the wind slips through the window just right, I swear I can hear the girl I used to be, brighter, steadier, louder, but now my voice has softened into something thinner, something shaped by years of waiting for someone to call me back. Funny how the world gets quieter as you age, but the ache gets louder. My house used to sound full, even when it wasn't. Leonard humming while shaving, my son Mark running down the hallway with his little socks sliding on the wood, me laughing at something I can't remember now. Life sounded like home. Nowadays, it sounds like the refrigerator buzzing and the heater clicking on and my own breath in the dark. Age doesn't scare me. Silence does. The kind that settles into your bones when the people you raised forget you still exist. When Mark was little, he clung to me like a shadow, called me Mama Ellie until his voice cracked somewhere between middle school and heartbreak. Even in college, he'd call every Sunday, even when he was late on assignments, even when he was broke, even when he didn't know who he was yet. Then he met Jessica, a woman with a smile sharp enough to slice through sincerity. And just like that, my Sunday calls dried up. I tried to blame life, schedules, work, the usual excuses we tell ourselves to avoid the truth. But deep down I knew, the shift wasn't accidental, it was designed. Jessica had carved out a space for herself, and in doing so, she sanded me down into almost nothing. I don't hate her, I don't waste the energy, but I remember the first time she came over, the way she glanced at my crocheted pillows like they were relics from a yard sale, the way she winced when she tasted my sweet tea, as if being Southern was a defect. I remember handing her a scarf I knitted in soft plum yarn, hoping to welcome her. She lifted it between two fingers, smiled politely, and said it was thoughtful. Not kind, not lovely, just thoughtful, like she wasn't sure what to do with something made by these wrinkled hands. And Mark. Oh, Mark. My sweet boy who used to run home with scraped knees because he didn't want me to worry. Now, he barely answered the phone, barely visited. When he did show up, he'd stand on my porch like a delivery man with somewhere more important to be. I kept sending gifts to the grandbaby's little books, knitted sweaters, silly puzzles, but I never heard a word back. No thank you. No picture. Nothing. And still, every birthday, I wrapped each present with ribbon and hope. Hope is stubborn. It sticks to you even when you try to dust it off. Leonard's been gone for 13 years now. Cancer took him slow, like a thief savoring the pain. Before he passed, he tucked a wooden box in the mantel and told me not to open it unless I needed to remember my worth. But I was too proud back then to believe I'd ever forget who I was. Life has a funny way of humbling us. One winter morning, my knees buckled while I was peeling sweet potatoes. I slid down to the kitchen floor and sat there, breath shaking, eyes burning, staring at the half-peeled potato like it had betrayed me. The doctor said arthritis, said it gently, like it wasn't the beginning of a slow decline. I came home to an empty house and cried into the sink, the way women like me do, quietly, privately, letting the tears fall where no one would slip on them. My friend Mabel from church told me I needed help, not hospital help, heart help, someone to check in, someone to remind me that I wasn't floating alone in the world. She said it so matter-of-factly that I almost laughed, but the truth was sitting right beside me every day. I was getting tired, and tired women make dangerous decisions. Either we give up or we finally stand up. I wasn't ready to do either yet. I just wanted someone to sit with me in the quiet. So I wrote a little note and pinned it at the local pharmacy. Elderly woman seeks part-time help. Must be kind. I underlined kind, because kindness is the rarest currency left in this world. 3 days later, Maria knocked on my door. She had on a soft green sweater and smelled faintly of coconut oil. Her smile wasn't bright, it was warm, steady. The kind of smile you feel before you see. She held her hands folded neatly, like she didn't want to scare me with too much eagerness. Mrs. Perry, she asked. I'm Maria. I saw your posting. I listened pretty good. I watched her for a moment, not because I doubted her but because something inside me whispered, this one right here. She moved into my life the way sunrise moves across a living room wall. Soft, unassuming, beautiful if you know how to look. She didn't hover or fuss, just knew things. Knew how I liked my tea barely sweet, hot enough to sting. Knew my good days from my bad without me saying a word. Some afternoons, she left little surprises, a peppermint on the table, a flower on the sill. Nothing big, nothing loud, just reminders that I was still seen, still worthy. When someone treats you gently after years of feeling invisible, it does something to you. something tender, something frightening. It reminds you how starved you've been without ever noticing your hunger. Mark didn't call during this time, not once. Not even after I left 3 voicemails saying I missed him. I baked a lemon pound cake for him one Sunday, like old times. Wrote his name on it with shaky icing. When I called to tell him, the phone rang and rang, until his voicemail picked up with that cold automated voice. The subscriber you're trying to reach. I felt something wilt inside me. Something I'd been watering for far too long. One morning, I decided to deliver gifts to the grandkids myself. Maria drove me to their pretty 2-story home, with a gate that whispered keep out even when open. I stood at the door, holding 2 boxes, one with a dress I stitched for my granddaughter, one with a rocket book for my grandson. I knocked, waited, knocked again. The house was quiet in that fake way, like a person holding their breath so you walk away. I looked up and saw the curtain move. They were in there, watching me, choosing not to answer. I placed the boxers gently on the welcome mat and whispered, "This is the last time." But I knew it wasn't. I always gave one more chance. That's the thing about mothers, we bend until we split. That night, I sat in my chair with the TV on mute, the whole world hissing quietly in the background. Maria found me clutching the wooden box from the mantel. She didn't ask questions, just sat beside me and placed her hand on mine. I hadn't realized how much I missed being touched kindly. Later, when she went to bed, I opened the wooden box for the first time. Inside was Leonard's old handwriting, shaky but full of love. "Ellie, when the time comes, don't leave what we built to people who don't love you. Give it to someone who does." My breath caught, my chest tightened. I read that line so many times it blurred. Sometimes clarity isn't a lightning bolt. Sometimes it's a whisper from a man you buried 13 years ago. I knew then what I needed to do. I didn't tell Maria. Not yet. I didn't want her to think it was impulsive or emotional. It wasn't revenge. It was remembrance of myself. I made an appointment with Mr. Brantley, my lawyer. He welcomed me like an old friend, offered me tea, asked about my knees. I told him I wanted to update my estate plan. He nodded like he had been waiting for me to say those words. "Everything?" he asked. "Everything," I replied. By the time I walked out of that office, my entire life had shifted. My home, my savings. The land Leonard left, all of it was now marked for someone who had shown me love without expecting a dime. Someone who sat with me when I cried. Someone who treated me like a person, not a paycheck. Maria didn't know it yet, but she would. One day, I felt light driving home. Not happy, just free. Like I'd been carrying a heavy coat in summer and finally shrugged it off. The universe, however, doesn't let peace sit too long. It always shakes the table when it sees you settling. 3 days later, the phone rang. I picked up expecting Mabel. Instead, Jessica. Her voice was sugar-dipped in poison. "Eleanor," she said, crisp and cool. "We got your letter." I didn't speak. I just listened as she sliced every word with that perfect tone. "Mark and I are deeply concerned about your recent decisions. We think you've been influenced." I sat down. My legs weren't steady enough for this conversation. "You need to stop coming by. It's upsetting for the children. Quite frankly, they're afraid of you." Afraid. That word pierced me like a shard of glass. I whispered, "What did you tell them?" Silence, then a sigh, condescending and sharp. "We're doing what's best for our family. Please stop interfering." Interfering, like I was some stray wandering into their yard. When she hung up, the quiet in the house expanded until it swallowed me whole. I didn't know pain could sound like that, like a ringing in your ears, mixed with your own heartbeat. Maria found me sitting on the floor again, palms pressed to my eyes. "Miss Eleanor," she whispered. I finally said the words out loud. She said, "My grandbabies are afraid of me." The way Maria knelt beside me, the way her face softened, it felt like someone wrapping a blanket around my soul. In that moment, I realized something painfully simple. I had spent years apologizing for wanting to be loved by people who did not care if I lived or died. Maria stayed with me, that weak, quiet, gentle, present. I swear the girls' heartbeats on the same rhythm as Mercy. But even she couldn't prepare me for what happened next. Mark and Jessica showed up unannounced. They stood on my porch like judges delivering a verdict. Jessica wore beige, her favorite armor. Mark looked uncomfortable, like he'd rather be anywhere else. "We need to talk about your will," Jessica said without blinking. "No," I replied softly. "You need to leave." Their faces stiffened. For the first time in years, I watched Mark's eyes really look at me and see someone he no longer recognized. That's the price of distance. You forget the shape of the person who raised you. Jessica sneered at Maria, accusing her of manipulation, of being an opportunist. I stepped between them. My voice sharper than I intended. She's done nothing but care for me, something neither of you has bothered to do. The air froze. Jessica's smile fractured. Mark's lips parted as if he had something to say but couldn't summon the courage. They left. Furious, threatening lawyers, threatening evaluations, threatening consequences. Maria was shaking when the door closed. She said she didn't want to cause trouble, that she would resign, that she didn't want to be the reason my family fell apart. I begged her not to go, but she did. She walked out the door with her little suitcase and her lavender-scented sweater, and my heart cracked in a place I didn't know hearts could crack. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, listening to the silence grow heavier by the minute. That night, maybe out of instinct, maybe out of fury, I changed everything again. Not the will, the legacy. I called Mr. Brantley and instructed him to create something new. Something for girls like Maria, girls who had survived too much, kept too quiet, loved too deeply. I named it the Lavender Heart Fund. He asked why lavender. I told him, because kindness should have a color. After that, I wrote Maria a letter, not a dramatic one, a gentle one. The kind a mother writes when she hopes her child will forgive her. I told her the truth. That I didn't want her for what she could do for me. I wanted her because she treated me like a person when my own blood treated me like a relic. Days passed. Weeks. The house felt wrong without her laughter inside. I kept expecting to see her bent over the plants she always fussed with, telling them to drink up babies, but the house stayed still. Quiet, too quiet. Then my phone rang. Maria Mark. His voice trembled like a child caught in a lie. He had discovered the truth. Every dollar, every choice, every consequence. And in that moment, I realized something I should have known years ago. He didn't want me. He wanted what came after me. I let him talk. Let him cry. Let him unravel all the selfishness he had stitched into his adulthood. And when he finally said, "Mama, you can't do this to me," I answered with the calmest truth I've ever spoken. "I didn't do anything to you, Mark. I just stopped letting you do it to me." I hung up. The silence afterward didn't hurt. It healed. That evening, when the sun dipped low and gold spilled across my living room floor, there was a knock. I opened the door. Maria stood there, holding lemon bars in a little paper bag, her eyes soft and unsure. I got your letter," she whispered, "and I'm sorry I left like that. I didn't want to cause trouble." I shook my head. "You didn't cause trouble, baby. You brought me back to myself." She stepped inside, and the house exhaled right then. I knew this was the beginning of something new, something tender, something chosen. The first part of my story ends there, not in triumph, not in revenge, but in something gentler, a beginning shaped by loss and found again in the hands of a girl who reminded me that love isn't blood, love is presence. Maria sat on my couch again like she'd only stepped out for a moment, not banished for days. She smoothed the blanket across her lap out of habit, looked around my living room with that shy, searching gaze of hers, and whispered, "It feels the same, like nothing moved." I wanted to tell her everything had moved. The house, the air, my heartbeat, none of it had settled right since she'd left. But I didn't want to burden her. I'd done enough of that, so I just smiled and told her I'd missed her humming in the kitchen. She'd brought lemon bars, wrapped in foil the way her foster mother used to do. They tasted like sunshine trapped in sugar. We sat together, side by side, not touching, just breathing in the same room, like two tired souls, finally finding the right rhythm again. I didn't tell her about the Lavender Heart Fund yet. I wanted the moment to be small, gentle, just her and me and the soft sound of settling dust. But as we sat there, I could feel something shift in my bones, like the universe finally exhaled after holding its breath too long. The next few days, Maria came and went as naturally as she had before, but with a softer step, like she was afraid she might spook the moment and send it scattering again. I didn't push. I let her move at her own pace, watering plants, wiping down the counters, humming old gospel songs that reminded me of my grandmother. The house began to sound alive again, not full, not bustling, just quietly breathing. On the fourth day, she found me sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a letter from the attorney. She tilted her head, her braids falling like ribbons across her shoulders. "Everything okay?" she asked. I folded the letter, slid it beneath my palm, and said, "I want to tell you something, but not yet. When your heart's steadier, when mine is too." Her smile didn't fade. She just nodded. "Whenever you're ready." There is a kind of grace in not rushing someone, a grace mothers know, a grace Maria learned on her own, probably long before she ever met me. That girl had lived lifetimes in her short years. You can see it in the way she flinches at raised voices, in the way she apologizes for things she didn't cause, in the way she loves quietly because she never expected love back. One afternoon, she brought in a new potted plant with tiny purple blooms. "For the porch," she said, cheeks pink. "Thought it'd brighten things up a little." I touched the petals. They were soft, fragile, trembling slightly in the breeze. "Lavender phlox," she added. "They're stubborn little things. They'll bloom even in rough soil." I looked at her then, really looked, and felt something tighten in my throat. "That makes two of us," I whispered. She laughed, not knowing what I meant. Later that evening, after she went home, I pulled out Leonard's letter again. I'd read it so many times the paper felt warm from memory. He'd always seen me more clearly than I saw myself. Even in death, his words carried weight. "Love should go where love lives." That line had changed everything. Sometimes I wonder if he knew, even then, that Mark would drift away, that grief and adulthood and marriage would pull him into a world where I wasn't needed anymore. Maybe Leonard had sensed it before I could. But even with all that clarity, the ache didn't disappear. I still checked the mailbox every morning for some apology from Mark, some acknowledgement, some scrap of the boy he used to be. Nothing came. Days slipped into weeks. The silence between us became a canyon, and I finally realized some children don't come back. Some children walk away from the table you spent your whole life setting for them and never look over their shoulder to see who's still standing there. One cloudy afternoon, as I was sweeping the porch, I saw a familiar car slowly roll to a stop in front of my house. Jessica's beige SUV. It sat there for a long moment idling, like a beast deciding whether to pounce. But it didn't pounce. It didn't even growl. Eventually, it drove off. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or disappointed. Sometimes confrontation feels easier than absence. At least you're seen in a fight. That night, sleep didn't come easy. I kept replaying her words. "The children are afraid of you," and it stung every time. Like a thorn you forget about until you grab the stem again. I sat up in bed, looked around my dim room, and said out loud, "I am not a monster." My voice trembled, not from doubt but from exhaustion. I was tired of defending myself in empty rooms, tired of explaining my existence to the shadows of people who abandoned me. In the morning, Maria arrived with her hair tied up in a scarf and a smile that didn't hide the fact that she'd been crying. "Rough night?" I asked gently. She nodded but didn't elaborate. I recognized that kind of pain, the kind you don't want to name because naming it makes it real. So I made her tea, the way she made it for me when my world was falling apart. We sat for a while in silence, sipping, breathing, patching ourselves together slowly. When she stood to leave, she hesitated at the door. "Miss Eleanor?" Her voice was small. "Are you sure you want me around? I don't want to make your life harder." I felt something hot and sharp rise in my chest. "You don't make my life harder," I said, steady as stone. "You make it bearable." Her eyes softened. She nodded and left. And I realized, as the door clicked shut, that love isn't always loud or grand. Sometimes it's a girl asking if she's allowed to stay. 2 days later, a thick envelope arrived from Jessica's lawyer. Pages upon pages of accusations disguised as concern. Claims that I was incompetent, that I was being exploited, that the will was invalid due to external influence. I almost laughed at the absurdity, but beneath the absurdity sat a cold truth. They would rather paint me as senile than admit they abandoned me. Pride is a strange beast. I handed the papers to Mr. Brantley the next morning. He skimmed them with a bored expression, then patted my hand. "Don't you worry," he said. "People who neglect their elders tend to panic when they see consequences." I nodded, but the knot in my chest stayed. The world feels heavier when love becomes a battlefield. That evening, rain started, a slow, steady drizzle tapping the windows like a restless visitor. I made soup-potato canned, poured myself a bowl, but I barely touched it. My gaze kept drifting to the empty chair across from me, Maria's chair. Her absence felt like a second shadow. I couldn't take the silence anymore. I stood, grabbed my coat, and stepped into the rain. The world looked washed, blurred, like everything had softened around the edges. I walked to the little garden out front where Leonard used to plant marigolds. The dirt was cool, damp beneath my slippers. I crouched even though my knees protested and whispered, "Leonard, I hope I'm doing this right." No answer. Of course, just the rain. When I came inside, the phone was ringing. I picked up Miss Eleanor. It was a nurse from the clinic where Maria volunteered. "I thought you should know. Someone's been asking about her. Your family, I think. She left early today." Seemed shaken. A coldness spread through my chest, like someone had poured ice water straight into my heart. I thanked her and hung up. my hand trembling. My family, my own family, had gone after the only person who stood by me. And for what? For money they didn't earn. For a future they'd already counted. Rage is different in old age. It doesn't explode. It simmers. It burns slow and steady, like coal beneath a fire that refuses to die. I dialed Mark. He answered on the third ring. "Mama," he said cautiously. "Don't you mama me." My voice was steady, low, far calmer than the storm inside me. "I know what you did, or what you let her do. And let me tell you something, I could forgive you for neglect. I could forgive you for silence. But going after Maria, that's a line you don't cross." He stuttered, tried to deny, tried to explain, but explanations don't matter when the wound's already been carved. "You will get nothing," I said. "Not because I'm cruel, but because you showed me exactly what my love means to you." When I hung up, I didn't shake, I didn't cry, I just breathed thinly, deeply, like I'd been underwater for years and had just reached the surface. The next morning, the world felt clearer. I made coffee, turned on the radio, watered the plants. The lavender phlox Maria brought sat on the porch, droplets clinging to its petals like tiny pearls. Life, even in small ways, keeps trying. After breakfast, I boxed up cookies, lemon shortbread, Maria's favorite. I planned to deliver them the next time she returned, if she returned, but I held on to hope, because hope, as I've learned, isn't stupid. Hope is stubborn love. Around noon, I sat at the table and wrote Maria another letter. Not long, just honest. I told her I wasn't angry she left. I wasn't disappointed. I was just sorry she had been dragged into a storm she never asked for. Sorry my family made her doubt her worth. Sorry I couldn't protect her from their cruelty. Then I wrote something I hadn't said aloud yet. You are family, in the purest sense, in the way people choose each other. I sealed the envelope and placed it near the door, ready to mail. As I stood there, a memory rose, me teaching Mark how to tie his shoes, his tiny fingers fumbling with the laces. Try again, I told him, again and again, until he finally got it. He had looked up at me with so much pride. I used to believe moments like that could tether people to each other forever, but time frays even the strongest. Knots. 2 days later, just before sunset, I heard footsteps on the porch, slow, hesitant, soft as regret. I opened the door. Maria stood there. Her face was tired, her eyes red, her hands shaking slightly as she held out a paper bag. "I made lemon bars," she whispered. "Didn't want you to go to bed without something sweet?" My heart cracked in the gentlest way. I pulled her into my arms, and for the first time in months, the ache inside me loosened. She hugged me back with that same quiet strength she had shown since the day she walked into my life. "I missed you," I breathed. "I missed you too," she murmured. "And I'm not leaving again. Not unless you tell me to." I shook my head. "Baby, I'd never tell you to leave." We went inside, and the house, my quiet, aching house, felt like it inhaled warmth again. She took her old seat on the couch, tucked her legs beneath her, and asked if my tea kettle still made that funny whistling sound. I laughed, and it felt like something blooming in my chest. That night, we didn't talk about the will, didn't talk about the fight, didn't talk about Mark or Jessica. We just talked like two souls who had wandered far and finally found each other again. In the morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains like a blessing, and I knew the hardest part of my story was behind me, but not the end. There was still the truth to tell, and the future to hand over. Maria stayed, not as a helper, not as a guest, but as someone who finally understood she was wanted. The house felt different with her moving through it again. Humming in the mornings, opening curtains I used to keep half drawn. Light behaved differently around her, almost as if it followed her from room to room. A week later, I took her with me to sign the final documents. She didn't know why we were going until we were already sitting in the attorney's office. Sunlight bouncing off the polished table. When Mr. Brantley slid the papers toward me, she looked confused. When he slid the next set toward her, she froze. "You're the sole beneficiary," he said gently. "It's all been finalized." Her breath stuttered. "Miss Eleanor, why would you do this for me?" I didn't touch her hand. I just looked at her the way my husband used to look at me when he wanted me to hear something without words. "Because you loved me when nobody else remembered how," I said softly. "Because family isn't made by blood, it's made by kindness, by who shows up when you're breaking quietly in the dark." She cried. The soft, quiet kind of tears that fall from a person who never expected a single good thing to truly belong to them. We went home in silence, but it was the warm kind of silence that says everything already landed where it was supposed to. A month later, at the small church down the hill, We held the first ceremony for the Lavender Heart Fund. Nothing grand. No fancy speeches. Just a circle of folding chairs, a tray of cookies, and a teenage girl named Destiny who hugged Maria so tightly it made my knees weak. That girl walked away clutching her scholarship certificate like it was a passport into a future she never thought she'd get to claim. And standing there, watching them, I realized I wasn't passing down wealth. I was passing down a doorway, a flashlight, a hand steadying another hand. I still send my grandchildren letters. Nothing heavy, just little stories about the garden or the weather. I don't expect responses anymore. I don't wait for them. Love doesn't have to return to be real. Sometimes it's enough to send it out into the world, like light through a window, even if no one looks up to see it. Maria brings me flowers every Sunday now, sometimes roses, sometimes cheap grocery store bouquets, sometimes wildflowers she steals from the roadside and arranges in a jar, like treasure. She calls me mama sometimes, and each time she does, something inside me threads itself back together. My son tried to erase me. Life tried to quiet me, but I gave my love to someone who knew what to do with it. Someone who carried it gently, like a seed she knew would grow if she just kept watering it. And now, in the evenings, when the sun sinks low and the house glows that soft honey gold, I sit in my favorite chair and think about how strange and beautiful it is that the heart can break 1,000 times and still learn to bloom again. I'm not afraid of storms anymore because inside this little house, inside this small, stubborn life, I refuse to surrender. The light is still on.